In this next aspect of the Ultra 4 chassis design, I'm figuring out how to mount the spare tire to the back of the vehicle with sort of a unique mechanism that I personally haven't seen before. Now I need to start figuring out how to tie in the rear of the chassis. And I left that side profile sketch pretty blank back there because there's just a ton of components that I need to get around, like the engine, and I need to figure out where the fuel tank is going to live. You can see that exhaust is sort of in the way. I ended up changing that design to make room for the fuel tank, and I need to figure out how to tie in these rear bump stops as well. So the rear of the chassis ended up being the most complicated because it didn't follow a specific shape. It was just playing connect the dots with the points on the chassis and leaving clearance for all the components that are stuffed back there in the mid-engine configuration, which makes it sort of challenging. So now I need to figure out how to tie in the rear spare tire mount in a way that makes sure that it's strong enough to carry the load of that 300-pound tire and wheel combination, as well as leave clearance for it to swing down without crashing into the chassis. So I ended up going with a cantilever design because when the vehicle's moving, the majority of the weight of the wheel is going to be resting on the rear of the chassis and not that cantilever. The cantilever is only constraining it in the longitudinal direction, and the force load from the spare tire will be just bouncing up and down on the back of the chassis, which there's plenty of room for lots of tube work back there. And so I'm using X bracing and straight lines here to make this because this is not a prominent aspect of the chassis. You won't be able to see this very much when the tire is in its tilted up position. And when the tire is resting on the chassis, it's on a flat plane. So I want to use flat lines and straight edges. And I just need to tie that trellis X-frame into the center bottom tube of the chassis and create a little box for the rear winch to go in, because the rear winch is essential for tilting that spare tire down. So the idea is you would loop the winch cable around the back of the tire and then pull it over and around that arc to get it down, rather than using 300-pound gas struts or something crazy like that. So the rear of that chassis is starting to take shape. I just need to make sure there's enough clearance for everything, especially for the suspension to cycle through and the rear tire. And again, that exhaust that you see there poking through, that's going to get changed. And so there's my first arc back there. Yeah, that exhaust is no longer going to be going through the center of the spare tire. So this is the cradle, so to speak, for the rear spare tire to mount to. It's just going to rest on this trellis back here. And I'm just making sure that I have lots of room for the suspension components to cycle through.